the early words that it was not gods, that's a recent word, but Deva, Dios, Deos, Diva, come from Sanskrit and then brought over from India into the Middle East, into the languages of the Middle East that then got translated into God in English and Dios in Latin. Those words meant beings from the sky. And so the descriptions, I mean, if you look in the Bible, Ezekiel, the fiery chariot, that description is no different from descriptions we're getting today of UFO phenomenon. If you look at the stories from Africa or from Native Americans, and if you look at the art, for example, of Native Americans showing objects from the sky that are circular and whirling, and they're very much like those reported in Indian texts and Hebrew text and other texts. So what I'm suggesting is in the book, and this is what's controversial, I'm suggesting that the historical stories are really no different than the current A, B, and ET stories. That the way they're described by humans, the kind of messages that are given, the kinds of interaction that are given, and the human reaction to them is very similar. And what concerns me is the human reaction. We are afraid of them. We are submissive to them. We bow down and worship them. We form cults around them. All of these things happen around the world and have happened historically. And what I'm suggesting is that if we're going to, as a human species on this planet, have peace on earth among ourselves, we've got to sit down around a table and say, this is the information that I got from the God I believe in. This is the information I got from the psychic channel that I believe in. This is the information I got when I was abducted to a UFO craft, and this is what the aliens told me we need to do to save ourselves on this planet. Because all the messages were, for the most part, pretty helpful. They were positive messages. Except some of them were very threatening, because they said, if you don't change your ways, if you don't change your behavior, you're going to destroy yourselves. You're going to destroy your planet. You're going to destroy your society. The problem comes when you have the priesthood that comes in between. And this happened in history, where you had the person or the persons who received these messages on Mount Sinai, in the desert in Arabia, in the United States in terms of Moroni speaking. And this goes right on down to the current day. I mean, there's Ramtha, who speaks to J.Z. Knight out in Oregon. You've got the Course in Miracles. You still have these kinds of voices happening. And what happens to humans who get this information then make themselves the authorities and the interpreters of these voices from other beings. And what happens then is that they begin to get control of institutions. They get control of groups of humans who look to them as the interpreters of the information. And what that does is put all of us then in a very, what I would call unhuman mode.
Where you're just subjugated to the authority of
the authority of the interpreters of the priesthood. And the priesthood could be any group. I mean, in New Age terminology, it's the channel, you know, who says, I received a message from so-and-so, and if you will sit and listen to me, that voice will speak through me. And what happens is we know from research and studies of these phenomena that any communication from other beings that comes through a human interpreter is just like me interpreting a Frenchman speaking to you, and you don't speak French, and I, in my French, which is not perfect, try to explain to you what that Frenchman said. So you have the voices that are speaking to humans, and you have imperfect humans with their own worldview, their own biases, their own assumptions, explaining what was said, and that leads to dependence of all of those people who listened to the interpreters. And so the interpreters then have a great deal of power and authority.
Yeah, I know the lost books support this theory. They're just chock full of examples of things that sound like a lot of the current alien abduction reports, or even the Roswell incident where they had the piece of material and it couldn't cut it, couldn't burn it.
Right.
The same thing was true of in the lost books of a piece of Jesus's swaddling clothes was cut. It was a tradition.
Right.
For the wise men were going to burn it in the fire. They were going to cut it up into pieces so they each have a piece to symbolically burn in the fire. And
sure.
And they couldn't cut it or burn it. And
exactly. Well, you have the same descriptions. You know, you have, if you take Moses on Mount Sinai, you know, appearing as a cloud of smoke by day and as a burning fire at night. This is very reminiscent of a lot of the UFO reports today. And I mentioned Ezekiel earlier. There are many others. You look at the Roman mythology. You look at the Indian mythology. You have the same description of crafts. You have firing rockets. You have firing jets. You have noise and thunder and roaring, and you have people with wings coming down, and you have people interacting with humans. And just as it says in the Old Testament, the gods of old found favor with the women, the daughters of man, and had intercourse with them and created the giants.
Right.
Well, this story is replete with details that you can find in traditions around the world, and that you find actually today in the UFO literature. So what bothers me is that we have all this information, historical and worldwide, about these experiences, and we don't, as a society, sit down and talk about them the way we would talk about the problem with, food difficulties, or problems about disease, or, if we have a problem in our society, frequently we try to sit down around a table and talk about the evidence.
Right. But logic is not allowed. I mean, just like in the Lost Books also, they have the Ark of the Covenant there, and a voice speaks to them from the Ark. You know, I don't know, it could be some kind of communicator device, or, but there's an actual, the way it's described, the voice is telling them what to do. And in fact, when they didn't pick the husband for Mary, they went back and said nothing happened. You know, there was supposed to be a sign that it that it was going to be Joseph or whatever, and then the voice explained to them why it didn't work, because Joseph wasn't there.
That's right. Well, this is, see, what we do is we make divine things which are natural interactions. And what I've tried to do in that book, and the reason I lumped all of these things together, is to suggest that it's time to, as human beings who are in our consciousness, in our essence, in our soul genome, as we talked about in that earlier program, we're all part of the universal consciousness. Whatever and whoever the creator of this universe is, we are all equal aspects of that force, of that consciousness. And what happens when people lose that sense of who we are and our independence as individuals and our free will to make choices and to live and learn and adapt and progress, and we give up our power to the interpreters, to the people who write the books, who interpret the books, and who distort the books. And we know from history that so many of these books, they're in so many different versions.